After what feels like years of anticipation, Disney's live-action reimagining of their very own beloved classic, The Little Mermaid, has hit theaters, and I saw it. If you're familiar with this channel, you're likely aware that the 1989 version is my favorite Disney movie, and it's very important to me. That left me in an interesting place when it came to this remake. So, as a massive fan of The Little Mermaid, what did I think of this retelling? Let's get into it. I've become really cynical about the Disney live-action remakes. Along with many others, I have grown tired of them because they often end up feeling like lazy, hollow cash grabs. Disney figured out how to harvest nostalgia and just never looked back. Some are better than others, but the only one I feel is truly good is Cinderella, and I made a video on that if you'd like to hear about my reasoning. After Cinderella, I spent a long time in the cycle of being excited for the next live-action adaptation, believing it would be good, and then ultimately being let down. Hope stayed alive because Cinderella's existence let me know that it was possible for these films to be good, but you can only get burned so many times. Mulan was my final nail in the coffin. From then on, I adopted a pessimistic mind frame where I automatically expected the next remake to be trash. And I don't like to be overly negative, but I can't blame myself for falling into this line of thinking. I think that Pinocchio was the absolute worst attempt so far, and that sort of validated me in my mindset. It was a pretty clear pattern, and so I placed my bar firmly on the floor. When it came to The Little Mermaid though, it got a little more complicated. Being my favorite, I obviously really wanted it to be good, but was it realistic to think that it could be? Back when the casting news came out, I was actually really pleased with the Ariel and Eric castings. I wasn't so hot on Ursula, but it was trending positive. Flash forward to a few months ago when we got the first trailers and then TV spots, I got fairly concerned. The underwater animation looked questionable and dimly lit. What really steered me back into expecting the worst were the CGI designs of Flounder and Sebastian. I thought they just looked awful and difficult to take seriously. I then found that I started to dig my heels in and realized that I was not only expecting, but actively hoping that this movie would be bad. And that was strange. I started questioning, as a staunch lover of Disney's 1989 version, do I want this remake to be good or bad? And why would I want it to be bad? Probably because the remakes had a track record of feeling like slaps to the faces of their animated counterparts. I guess I wanted to feel justified in my distaste for them. I didn't want to believe that these vehicles that I'd seen disrespect previous Disney classics would succeed with the one I loved the most. And my relationship with Disney is complicated. I love their animated films and their parks more than anything, but the corporate side with their simultaneous greed and disregard for the quality that got them where they are today only gets harder to try to reconcile. To my surprise, when the press embargo lifted and critics' first impressions of The Little Mermaid began trickling out, they were largely very positive. After this, I decided not to read people's thoughts about the movie and avoid new clips and scenes that were being released online because I wanted to try to go into this movie with as neutral a mind as possible. I wasn't trying to get my hopes up, but I wanted to be open to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I would be pleasantly surprised. Maybe Disney did have another genuinely great remake in them. And now that I've seen the film, would I say that they succeeded? To an extent. I think that this version of The Little Mermaid was overall very decent. I have several critiques, but there are elements and additions here that I think are genuinely great. I don't feel like this version disrespects or sucks the soul out of what the animated version was. In some ways it pales in comparison, but in other ways it elevates the source material. It didn't blow me out of the water, but I'm pretty okay with the movie overall. I'd even consider rewatching it, and that's actually very high praise coming from me. Let's go ahead and get into some specifics. Spoiler warning if you don't want to know exactly what goes on in this movie. I'll start with my negative leaning comments so that we can finish on a more positive note. I generally found the underwater portion of the movie, which is around the first third, to feel a bit lackluster. This part was the most similar to the animated version, which forces my mind to compare them more, and the remake doesn't win that matchup. The underwater animation looks a little better than I thought it would, and it's not quite as dark as it seemed in the trailers, but it still didn't wow me. The fact that Avatar: The Way of Water came out before this didn't do them any favors because the standard for underwater CGI is now very high. I also stand by my opinion that the designs of the animal characters are brutal. You do get used to them as the movie goes on, so they become less distracting, but I still really disliked that element, particularly Flounder. The voice work for these characters also didn't hold a flame to the originals. Jacob Tremblay I actually did not mind, but his character looked stupid and got a bit sidelined. Daveed Diggs was serviceable as Sebastian, but he was missing the oomph that Samuel E. Wright brought to the character. Then there's Scuttle. It's been common for Disney to gender bend characters for their reimaginings, which is fine, but specifically casting Awkwafina here feels like a little much. I can enjoy her in the right context, but she's getting a bit overexposed lately and ended up bringing more obnoxious energy than humor to the role. Overall, these characters really show me why animation was the best medium for this story, because you can take liberties with the designs and the audience could suspend their disbelief to accept talking and singing animals. They can also expressively emote. When faced with having to make them look realistic, it gets very tricky. They aren't the focal point of the movie though, so it's not like they ruin it. In a movie like The Lion King, where every character is an animal, it's a much bigger issue. In terms of new songs, it's a mixed bag. I'll be saving Ariel's new songs for the positive section, but the others I've got to talk about here. Eric's song, Wild Uncharted Waters, is actually a nice song, and it's cool to see him with his own number. We get a little more insight into his character. I saw someone describe it as Eric's own version of an I Want song, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I think where it's not quite clicking for me is the sound. I fully acknowledge how hard it must be to have a famous beloved soundtrack and to have to try to write new material that meshes naturally with that. That sounds daunting. But while I understand that, I still have to voice my critique that this song doesn't sound like it fits here. The other song I'm going to complain about, and if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm going to say, is Scuttlebutt. I am a fan of some of Lin-Manuel Miranda's work, but sometimes this man needs to be told no. A rap-style track written by Miranda and performed by Awkwafina is absolutely as obnoxious as you might imagine. And guys, I've tried to see if I have a stick up my ass. Like, is this fun? Is this funny? Am I just being stubborn and grouchy? No, I really don't think so. A select group of people, including children, may be able to jive with this, but I hated it, and it felt like it lasted forever in the theater. The Chef Louis segment is actually my least favorite part of the animated Little Mermaid, but if this is what we're getting instead as an attempt at humor, I'd rather just keep Louis. This made me actively miss him. A couple of minor notes on existing songs. I thought it was odd that Ariel joined in with Sebastian singing Under the Sea. It sounded great, but she's supposed to be super checked out of what Sebastian is trying to convince her of during that number. The other thing is about Vanessa's song, or lack thereof. The track Vanessa's Trick is really eerily beautiful, and to be honest, Halle's transition from Ariel's innocent vocal to Vanessa's more sinister vibe kind of ate, but I was hoping that she'd get to sing this part as well.
Soon I'll have that little mermaid and the ocean will be mine.
Not sure why they cut that out, but it isn't really a big deal, just something I would have liked to see. My other complaints come in the forms of King Triton and Ursula, who, get this, are officially siblings in this version. Not that that had any impact on the story. This is the first issue I'll raise, and that is surrounding adding plot points and details that do nothing. It's been long theorized that Triton and Ursula were related because of her line,
"When I lived in the palace."
So it was cool to get confirmation on that in this version, but they never explored it deeper, which I found a little disappointing. The other thing I'll bring up is Ursula's spell she puts on Ariel to make her human. For some reason she added this element where Ariel wouldn't remember that she had to kiss Eric. One thing I've always really loved about Ursula as a villain is how upfront she is. She lays everything she's doing out there in the open, which makes her manipulation skills that much more impressive. I didn't like that she felt the need to play dirty and be sneaky like that in this version. It also felt pointless because it didn't affect the plot at all. Sebastian just realized what was happening and told Ariel what she had to do anyways, and was there to remind her. Everything ended up happening in relatively the same way, so to me they just cheapened Ursula's character for no reason. I also found the characters of Triton and Ursula to feel like dulled versions of their animated counterparts. Melissa McCarthy was a little better than I thought she'd be as Ursula, but it still didn't hit. To be fair, no one can be Pat Carroll,
Yes.
but something was just missing for me there. And I think the hair and makeup department did her a little dirty. I had a bigger problem though with Triton. To me, Javier Bardem was giving nothing. Whether he was phoning it in or simply had a different approach to the character that didn't translate for me, I didn't like it. King Triton is extremely important to the story of The Little Mermaid because he's the one with the big character arc, and he felt like a limp noodle here. Whether it be in his rage or his heartfelt moments, I had a really hard time emotionally connecting to him. I was pretty disappointed about Ariel's lack of sparkly dress in the new version, but now I'm thinking that this Triton just didn't have it in him to design such a stunner. Now let's get into the good stuff, because there is quite a bit of it. Far and away, my biggest positive from this movie comes in the form of Ariel. I don't think I could have hoped for better. I mentioned being pleased with Halle Bailey's casting back when it was announced, and there were two main reasons I liked it. First, she was relatively unknown at the time, at least in the acting world. I always favor lesser known actors for Disney's remakes because it's far less distracting that way. This problem is well highlighted when looking at the example of Emma Watson being cast as Belle. Most of us are hyper aware that we're watching Emma Watson during that movie. It's harder to immerse yourself in the story and view her simply as Belle. Unknowns have a way easier time convincing me that they are that character. And that's not a knock on anyone's acting ability, it's just the way it is. The other reason I was really high on Halle's casting was because I read that the director, Rob Marshall, said that Halle was the one that best captured the spirit of Ariel. And that was always far more important to me than casting somebody who looked like the cartoon version. I love the animated Ariel's design, but that's not why I connect to her. It's in her passion and her spirit that she moves me, and hearing that that's what they focused on when casting made me excited. I don't particularly want to get into the racism of it all, but unfortunately, since a bunch of y'all don't know how to act, I feel like I have to at least acknowledge it. It's very common for people to cry woke when something is not straight or white these days. And sometimes things are done purely for the sake of diversity. That's obviously less organic, but is it really such a bad thing? Oh my god, people of other experiences exist and get to be represented in contexts they never have before? I'm gonna proceed to have a complete meltdown over this. I wish some of these people could see how ridiculous they look. I know that a lot of people aren't gonna believe this, but not everything is an agenda. Halle was the best person to bring live action Ariel to life. That's why she was cast. Cry about it. To complement the casting of Ariel, I also loved the casting of Jonah Hauer-King as Eric. I'd never heard of him in my life, and I was glad about that. Eric got a lot more fleshing out in this live action version, but he maintained that sweet, genuine disposition that we knew from before. It reminded me of how Kit, Prince Charming from Cinderella, got the chance to become a fully realized character in the 2015 Cinderella. Any of the scenes taking place on land in the new Little Mermaid are a high point. In fact, I'd say that if anything truly improved on the original, it was this portion of the film. Anything where Ariel and Eric are interacting is lovely. Halle and Jonah's chemistry is off the charts. Really, their dynamic in this movie warmed my heart and sort of won me over. The scene where they sneak back into the palace after their day touring the kingdom was so endearing. I like that they gave them a shared interest in discovering and collecting. It made so much sense the way that they were drawn to each other even without words, and it just felt like we got to spend a lot more time with them. I don't have any issues with the animated version, but the remake was the perfect opportunity to further explore and develop things like their dynamic. I fully believed that they were falling in love with each other, and I was rooting for them. Another positive comment about the on-land portion of the movie was that it looked a lot more appealing to me than the underwater stuff. It was brighter and warmer, and there were some nice set pieces, although I do prefer Eric's castle in the animated film. Out of the new crop of songs, I enjoyed Ariel's numbers the best. For the First Time is an infectious and quirky track that allows us some insight into Ariel's first experience on land. In some ways it feels like cheating to gain access to her inner thoughts, but the song is good enough for me to excuse that. Halle performed the track with such great vibrance. The second part of Your World reprise was actually a really nice addition as well. It was so interesting to hear Ariel call back to previous lyrics and ideas with a totally new and unfortunately jaded perspective. This specifically harkens back to Hans Christian Andersen's original fairy tale, which had much darker tones and themes. Part of Your World is my favorite Disney song. I have an entire video breaking down the impact that song has had on Disney as a company, as well as millions of people around the world. Howard Ashman, Jodie Benson, and Glenn Keane came together to create a sequence in a film so perfect, magical, and resonant that I couldn't imagine anything else ever coming close. And to be totally honest, I don't think that this new version did live up to the original, but that's not really a fair comparison. Keeping expectations realistic, the scene and the song were still wonderfully done. I could have used a little more from the visuals, but Halle, as expected, knocked it out of the park with the vocals. In Jodie's rendition that Howard directed her in, there is a big emphasis on restraint that I think is a huge reason that song is perfect. Halle's version is grander and showcases more of her vocal skill. If I was being a stickler, I'd take a bit of issue with this, as relaying the human emotion beneath the song is the most important thing, but Halle still does communicate the longing and passion through her voice. It's just in a different way. And I know that if she tried to directly copy Jodie's execution, it would come off as disingenuous. It's sort of hard for me to explain my feelings on this because I hold the original in such high regard. I think it's perfect, so I don't believe it can be improved upon. That leaves me unsure of how someone new should approach it. Trying to be exactly the same is a recipe for failure because it will pale in comparison, but also trying something too different is questionable because it was already done so correctly. I don't know if this makes any sense, but to summarize my thoughts on this, I'll just say that I always knew I was going to struggle with this a little bit. I was always going to be hard on the new version of Part of Your World, but Halle Bailey did about as good of a job as I think was possible. Her voice is just stunning. Ariel as a character is bigger than any one person, and she shouldn't be gatekept. This new version of her brings freshness to the character and the story, and it provides a chance for new demographics of people to connect to her and see themselves in her. Jodie Benson, the original voice of Ariel, actually has a small cameo in the live-action movie. She plays a market vendor who gives Ariel a fork, or a dinglehopper, and they share this very sweet moment that honestly made me really emotional. It was like a visual representation of Jodie passing the torch to Halle in a way. That moment said that there's room for all of us under what Ariel stands for and represents. I know what her character has done for me, and I love thinking about what Halle's Ariel is going to do for others. Ariel is an extremely special character, and seeing that love shared from one Ariel to another was such a gift.
You look beautiful! Are you
It was also crazy to be in the theater in 2023 and see Howard Ashman's name roll in the credits of a new film. His work with Disney is timeless, and this will only contribute to bringing his incredible songs and unique vision to more people. And of course, it was wonderful to see Howard's song partner, Alan Menken, back as the composer once again. Hearing his magnificent score in the theater certainly got me feeling some type of way. I'm glad that Disney went with Rob Marshall to direct this project. His previous body of work suggested that he'd be able to handle the environment and the scope, and as a gay man, I believe that he had the appropriate unique insight to build on what Hans Christian Andersen created and what Howard Ashman put his indelible mark on. From watching some of Rob's interviews and having seen the movie, I really believe that he had a firm understanding of what made the original special and what he could do to enhance certain aspects of it in the live-action format. While I still have my complaints with specific elements, I could tell that he cared and had sincere intentions behind his approach. When it comes to Disney's remakes, seeing the way most of them have trended, I can't really ask for more than that. A little bit of heart and sincerity goes a surprisingly long way. And that's my review of 2023's The Little Mermaid. I'd been bracing for this one for a long time, so I'm relieved to say that I was generally pleased with the film. If you've seen the new movie, drop a comment below letting me know what you thought of it. There's sure to be a lot of different opinions, as always, and I'm interested to hear what you guys took away from it. If you liked this video, consider hitting like and subscribe, and head over to the Trove to find more Disney reviews along with rankings, trivia, and video essays. If you stuck around until the end, I'd like to thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time and your interest. You can expect more Disney related content coming to the Trove soon. Thanks again for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.